Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, lovers of all things fresh and new. Pour yourselves a tall, cold drink of your favourite flavour with a smattering of crushed ice. Perhaps even pop in a virtual umbrella for the vibes, if that's your fancy, and get comfy because you have 45 minutes or so of good times coming right your way. Welcome to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here, with virtual pina colada in hand, along with all its fruity Carmen Miranda-style trimmings that you'd expect at this time of the morning, welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
Well, I do like the idea of a pina colada sitting here, and we could do it virtual or real. Right. People wouldn't actually know. I'm not encouraging alcohol consumption to excess, of course, but
maybe a virgin pina colada.
Maybe a non-alcoholic version, yeah, which kind of defeats the purpose a bit, doesn't it? I think. But anyway, now I want to talk. There's got to be
a song in there somewhere, but anyway, keep going.
Probably, I want to talk about the 10,000 steps concept with exercise. Lots of people, and I've got a story today about exercise and about our obsession with exercise wearables and counting things. And for some reason, we have this 10,000 steps. And I hadn't heard the story before. Now, I apologise to listeners out there that know this story back to front and inside out. But I stumbled across this when I was doing a bit of research for this story about the 10,000 steps because I was interested.
10,000 steps. So we're just talking about 10,000 normal steps, or are we talking about going up 10,000 steps?
We're talking about the whole idea that when you're tracking your movement, you're trying to go, I want to hit 10,000 steps because that's really good for me.
Step goals, yeah?
Step goals, that's right. And I actually find it a bit frustrating when I look at my wearable and how much I've done for the day, because the main form of exercise I do is a bike ride. I might sit at my desk for maybe too many hours, but I'll do a bike ride each morning. But that doesn't count. My watch doesn't count that towards steps. So I'll be talking to one of my kids and they'll go, I've racked up my 10,000 steps for the day. And I go, well, I only hit 3,000 steps for the day, but I did a bike ride for an hour, but no, that doesn't count. So there's this number, this magic 10,000 steps. And I thought, where did that come from? How much science is there? Because I was a bit annoyed that my kids were beating me on competition. So I wanted to have some basis of fact. The 10,000 steps is a marketing number. There's no actual...
So as a step goal for the day,
yes,
it's just a marketing number.
A marketing number. Now, there is some fact around it now, but if I go back...
I was just going to say, it's so frustrating because my step counter changes my goal for the day depending on how many steps I've done the day before. And
that's just unfair.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating if you got to, say, 990 steps, but you didn't realise, and you look at your step counter for the day previous, and you realise you just fell short by 10 or 20 steps. Yeah, there is nothing worse than that. I'm talking about self-inflicted pain, otherwise inflicted pain. No, that's not worse.
Just knowing that you
missing your step goal by a couple of steps, terrible.
So back in 1965, in Japan, there was a company, and this particular company called a pedometer, or created a pedometer, and it was called the Manpo-kei, MANPO-KEI. And Manpo-kei translates to 10,000 steps meter. So this particular company, Yamasa Tokai, thought, well, 10,000 steps sounds pretty good, so we'll call the pedometer the 10,000 steps meter, translated obviously.
Right.
And so that was where the 10,000 steps came from. They didn't do a big research study. They didn't go and talk to a bunch of medicos saying, how many steps do you think you should do for the day? They just went, 10,000? That sounds pretty good. It's an extra digit.
They could have chosen any other number. They could have chosen the
9,000 steps. If the word
9,500 steps.
If the Japanese version of 9,000 steps meter sounded better, maybe they would have gone with 9,000 steps. So 10,000 step meter. So that's where the 10,000 comes from. But since then, there's been some studies done to see whether or not 10,000 is actually the number we should all be aiming for in our step count for the day. A Harvard Medical School study done back in 2019 said that 7,500 was really the magic number. Right. If you can get to 7,500, then it's clear that mortality rates, so fitness levels, etc., go up to 7,500. And then after 7,500, it's one of those examples where you can do a lot of extra for not much additional in terms of the outcome.
So I've only got 31 more steps to get. And I've hit the magic number.
That's right. So forget the 10,000.
I reckon 7,500 is easy to get to.
Well, obviously it's easier to get to than 10,000. But again, I still worry about the steps. So one thing that gets me is if you do some sedate walking around and it's just very calm and you keep your heart rate nice and low and you do your 7,500 steps, is that as good or better or worse than if you go and
half an hour
and
go
for it. Go for a sprint for 30 minutes and then take it easy the rest of the day, because I prefer that because that's just my lifestyle better. So I'm convinced that that's a better way to go. But surely getting a heart rate up, we know that's it, and we're getting into medical area now, so I don't want to go there. But I just thought it was funny that we sometimes do things because we've always done them. And the 10,000 steps, you said to most people, I've got to get 10,000 steps. So if you said why, then they'd kind of
just
look
because.
at you. Yeah, that's right.
Because my watch says I need to get 10,000 steps.
It's good, isn't it? Isn't there some proof on that? So no. And it goes all the way back to 65. I love that it's so long ago and we haven't really questioned it. So fascinating little story I stumbled across.
Absolutely. Now, in today's episode, we're enlisting the help of a little AI for coding support and putting out spot fires from around the planet. We'll also get a taste of the latest in virtual reality, and I mean a literal taste. And we'll check out the fastest thing on rails with China's latest entrance in the race of high-speed trains. But more of that later. For now, let's get rolling with our first story. The fact that devices need to be charged on a daily basis, if not more frequently, is for many a source of perpetual frustration and inconvenience. Indeed, sitting in a Surrey Hills hotel room, writing my notes for this episode, I found myself staring lamentably at my phone and its charge indicator slowly slipping towards zero because I'd left my charger at home 400 kilometres away. Lenovo has found a solution for their laptops at least, and all you need is a little sunshine, Matt.
Well, probably a lot of sunshine would help, but a little sunshine might do something for it. And it's that same thing that I say so regularly. If you're not sure of the answer is surface area. And people say to me...
I've just been teaching my biology class about that today.
Oh, good. People say, why don't they put some solar panels on your phone or on your notebook? And I say, not enough surface area. You look at your rooftop with all those solar panels on there, fantastic. But that's bigger, surface area-wise, than your mobile phone. So not really that practical. And we haven't worked out a way yet to wrap over the surface area to give lots of surface area for something that's not that large like a mobile phone. But Lenovo have got a notebook. Now, this is a concept notebook at this stage where they're showing off the fact that you've got an integrated solar panel on the lid of the notebook, and pretty impressive. So when we talk about rooftop solar, we think 24, 26% is reasonable for a conversion efficiency. And normally when you've got portable electronics, you don't get anywhere near that level. Well, one of the things that's exciting about this development is that Lenovo say they're getting 24% efficiency out of solar panels on the back, on the lid, if you like, the back of the lid of a notebook, which means that if you can sit that out in full sunshine for about 20 minutes, that's enough to give you about an extra hour worth of usage of the notebook.
There you go.
Which isn't too bad. Now, I thought that's great, but I don't want to be working on my notebook. It's getting a bit flat, and then I just close the lid and sit it out somewhere. That's right. 20 minutes, okay, right, I can do another hour's worth of work. But obviously, if you sit somewhere convenient where you're getting some sunshine on there, you may not get 20 minutes giving you an hour, but maybe you'll just maintain the charge, or maybe it will go flat at a slower rate. So if I'm sitting outside somewhere where there's enough sunshine around, it might be in a park bench, it might be just sitting outside at work where I've got an outdoor seating area, maybe that's enough just with the reflected sunlight you might get to give you that charge continuing on. So at the moment, the downside is obviously it's a concept notebook, but we've seen before, back in 2023, Lenovo came out with a Plus Gen 6, a ThinkBook Plus Gen 6, and that was a concept notebook. Well, that's actually being released in June this year. So it only took them 2 years to go from a concept notebook in that scenario to an actual one you can buy, a consumer product that you can go out in there and just order online. So with this one, maybe 2 years' time, if they get good reaction to it, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't get a good reaction to it.
Well, if it extends the battery life and it gives you just a little bit more working time for free. So
they must have gotten onto somewhere in Lenovo where they discovered they could produce solar panels at better efficiency, because they also announced the idea of a backpack solar panel, a kickstand solar panel. So basically having a backpack that you can then fold out and charge up. We've seen that sort of thing before, but this is the first time we've seen it from Lenovo. So obviously they've gone, you know what, we can do these solar panel things. Other people are getting into it. Maybe we can get into it as well. But I do love that idea of having a solar panel on the back of your notebook and away you go. Now, I know people are getting excited because they're thinking about a mobile phone, and everyone puts their phone face down now anyway because they don't want people reading their messages.
Yeah.
So they put it face down naturally. So people may be getting excited, but it's a lot smaller on your phone than it is on a notebook. And the notebook, you're getting reasonable battery life out of a notebook because you've got a fairly large battery. With a mobile phone, yes, sure, you're not using as much power as a notebook, but you're not getting a lot of power in from that phone flipped over in its front. So I don't know we're quite there yet.
But again, we're just trying to extend the life. We're not trying to recharge it back to 100.
Well, I absolutely agree, except in some scenarios, maybe if a cyclone named Alfred came along one day, for example, and knocked out lots of power, maybe you could say, well, at least I've got this phone or this notebook that I can sit out in the sun and charge up so I can make an emergency phone call or I can do something. It might not be a practical everyday scenario, but maybe extend it every day, but also in an emergency I could do it, or going to places where they may not have good grid power. Yeah, who knows? There's a whole range of things. But I do love the fact that we're looking at this more. I like how we say we, Lenovo and other companies are looking at it more.
In the 70s and 80s, we imagined that one of the indicators that you had arrived in the future was smell-o-vision. Feels a bit more of a folly these days, but a group of researchers have taken it one step further and cooked up a serving of e-taste for the New World Order. It's a concept that brings flavours from virtual reality to life, and so I guess this means we can expect the next Jamie Oliver show or Donna Habe cookbook to come with a little extra zing. Blow me down and pass me the virtual tomato sauce, Matt.
I do love that. Actually, tomato sauce, is that a in the fridge or in the cupboard sort of thing?
It's a cupboard thing for us.
Cupboard thing, yeah, wow.
Yeah. Are you a fridge person?
Well, I don't eat tomato sauce. I'm not a big fan, but I'm probably just being...
You're not the person to ask.
That's right, but I did hear something on the radio the other day, and
I'm sure it says on the label, refrigerate after opening.
And you ignore the label. James,
for the
what
last
are you doing?
30 years at least, I've ignored the label. Yeah.
Are you okay so far?
I've been okay.
Yeah, right, good. So smell-o-vision, and you mentioned smell-o-vision there, smell-o-vision goes back a little way. The first concept of bringing scent into the theatre was back in 1916.
Oh, right.
So there was a theatre in Pennsylvania that tried having the scent of roses come into the audience during a film to match what was happening in the actual film. So
I remember, like at school, we'd talk about, we'd have a creative writing task, and people say, "Oh, can you think of something, an invention you'd like to see in the future?" And half the class would go, "Oh, smell-o-vision."
It must have been popular at the time because I do remember growing up as well talking about smell-o-vision. Imagine a TV, you could watch a TV show and you'd smell it coming through. But there was a system that was developed by a Swiss inventor named Hans Laube, Laube, in the 40s and actually used in Hollywood in the 50s that basically had scents at different times during a film. And I remember when we were at Universal Studios in America at one stage, I think the theatre was something like 5D theatre.
Yeah.
Come in here. And so you'd sit in the theatre and there's only a short film that was on and you'd have a car going along in the wind and they'd have fans inside the theatre that blow all this air through and then they'd have a bit of misty rain. So you'd sit there and you get this misty rain coming down.
Yep.
And they did this one really creepy thing where they had a person on stage where spiders were running up their legs.
Yeah.
And to simulate that, they had this air coming up from underneath, and I swear there were creepy crawlies running up down my legs when this air was coming up. Yeah. So it's quite clever, but it's not a common thing you see in general theatres. And again, I don't know if they've ever talked about TVs being fitted out with smell-o-vision as such, but in this particular scenario, you've got food, you've got taste, where it's able to be taken, normal food, taste, normal food, and turned into a digital equivalent of that, and then sent remotely, whether it be 5 metres or 500 kilometres, and someone with this little device in the mouth, so you've got to actually have something in there, injects a gel where they've got the 5 tastes in that particular gel, so you can actually taste what you're seeing on screen.
Right.
And they did some testing with it, and they said, okay, have a taste of this and then tell us what it is. They found, so they did some different flavours like lemonade, cake, fried egg, coffee, fish soup, and the volunteers got the taste correct 87% of the time. Now, one of the things that fascinated me about that was a fried egg. I don't think so much of the taste of a fried egg, it's more the texture. It's kind of a little bit rubbery but breaks apart.
Yeah.
And you think that'd be important. If someone said close your eyes and put something in your mouth, I reckon I'd pick up the fried egg on the texture.
Yeah, texture is such a big part of
It
food
is.
that we eat, isn't it?
Yeah. So what they've got so far with this e-taste device is they can transmit the taste, but you've got the temperature. Yeah, not quite. Again, a hot egg versus a cold egg definitely tastes different. You've got the spiciness isn't quite quick, the aroma, even just the look of it. But I did think about the idea of watching a cooking show. And imagine buying some little device where you could watch a cooking show and you'd have it linked up, synchronized somehow. And so MasterChef, they'd go along and they'd taste something and then you'd be able to taste what they were tasting when they tasted. How cool would that be? It sounds like a lot of mucking around, to be honest, to have all this set up. It's not just like something that squirts out an aroma out the front of your TV. You go, oh, the cooking show's on, quick, go and get that thing and make sure it's got the stuff in it. So they've basically got glucose for the sweetness, citric acid for sourness, sodium chloride for saltiness, which kind of makes sense, magnesium chloride for bitterness, and then they've got a bit of glutamate for umami. So that's how they generate those 5 different tastes.
So you'd have to go down to your TV store and go and buy a bunch of little vials and top up your vials in your TV set to get this to work.
And imagine if it was wrong. Imagine if you had, for example, none of the glucose, but you still had some of the sodium chloride, and you're seeing the chef on screen going, that's beautiful. And you're going, that's disgusting. But, of course, it's got one ingredient missing. So it does sound clumsy. Maybe not watching TV shows. Maybe you'd go in somewhere and have a virtual reality experience, maybe rather than sitting at home.
Once they've invented it, it's up to the other people to work out what they want it for.
Yeah, that's right. I think there'll be lots of things, but I do think that would be a bit clumsy sitting at home trying to taste it. But just that whole idea of remote taste sounds fascinating. So stay tuned. I reckon that's only about 20 years away before we have that in the lounge room.
We currently live in the age of the fitness app. Tracking activity, heart rate, stress levels and sleep, they're all par for the course these days. Some apps also push dieting and calorie counting. We're tuning into our bodies with technology like we've never done before. The intentions of these apps are, of course, all good and in innocence, but can we say the same for the outcomes, Matt?
Well, I did have an experience when I was doing the research for this one where it was exactly what they're talking about. Sometimes myself and my wife and our kids, we've all got smartwatches, and sometimes someone in the family, maybe it's me more often than others, but sometimes someone will go, let's have a competition. So you can have a 7-day competition. And one of the issues with a 7-day competition is that you've got to get to 600 points as your maximum. But you don't always get to 600 points, but that's kind of the maximum. If you get to 600, you go, right, that's it. For today, I can't be beaten, but you've got the week, and if you're really keen, you make sure you hit 600 points every day, get your 4,200 points. You can't be beaten, and that's obviously the aim from my perspective anyway. When I have the competition,
Well, you've got to put the kids in their place.
That's exactly right. And we had this during this last week when I was in the middle of this competition with one of my kids who had initiated the competition, so she was obviously up for a big week of exercise. And I came home, I'd had a long day, I'd done my exercise in the morning, which normally knocks over most of the points, and then I get a few more points during the day from standing up or moving around. And I had a meeting that afternoon or went into that night. So I came home, it was probably 9 o'clock, and I was going to sit down. I just hadn't had dinner yet, so I was going to sit down, grab a bit of dinner and just relax for a bit before I went to bed. And then I looked at my watch and I was on 570 points, and that just wasn't good enough because my daughter had already hit her 600 points. So I went, I'm not going to go and have dinner. I'm going to do a few laps in the pool to get my 600 points before I allow myself to have dinner. And as I'm swimming, I'm thinking, is this healthy for me? Is this really at 9 or 9:30, whatever time it was at night, is this what I should be doing now? Is this really helping more? Or is this a bit obsessive? Who cares? As long as I get my 600 points, it's okay. And this is the problem they're finding. They actually did a study of studies, which I love the fact that it's not good enough to do a study anymore. You've got enough studies. Well, let's study the studies. That's right. Flinders University said, let's go and look at 38 different studies that links fitness apps and obsessive behaviour, looking at myself here, with weight loss or weight gain, body image, calorie counting, a whole range of things. And what they found were a few things. One of the things was fascinating. 311 million people worldwide in 2023 used health and fitness apps at some stage during that year to track meals, calories, exercise, to track something to do with their fitness or their health. So at first glance, you'd say that's pretty impressive. People are out there, they're worried. We know we're getting more obese as a world, but obviously some countries are worse than others. But go and look at that. That sounds fine. But regular users of those diet fitness apps were found to have higher levels of disordered eating or exercise. So they started to do things like, I'm going to be really obsessive, like coming home at 9 o'clock in the evening and going for a swim. I'm really obsessive. I'm going to really restrict my calorie intake until it becomes unhealthy in some situations. I'm going to exercise or over-exercise until it becomes unhealthy. So as much as we think they're doing a good job, maybe they're not. And some of the ways they do these are very clever. So they gamify some of the things. So they'll have streaks. You've got to get a certain amount of exercise every day for a streak. And I know one of my kids a few months ago, I said, let's go and do this. I know I'm on a streak at the moment. And I've gone, what? You're streaking around the streets of our city. Stop doing that. But she was on a certain exercise streak, so she couldn't come and do what I wanted to do until she went and did the exercise to keep a streak going. And so, again, you think, gee, that's good. That's nice and healthy. But is it really that healthy?
It's feeding the beast.
It is.
The obsessive beast.
Yeah, so they use rewards, they have progress graphs, all these sorts of things to really hook people in, because the designers of these apps want you to keep using those apps. Maybe they'll sell you some stuff.
That's
maybe
right.
they'll just have some way of keeping you with advertising.
If you're not using the app's useless.
Yep.
So they've got to keep you
That's
keep
right.
using the app.
And the other part is people sometimes feel a bit of guilt or a bit of anxiety because they haven't done their thing for the day. I haven't got my 600 points for the day. I haven't done my exercise. I've broken my streak. I had 28-day streak and now I've broken it. Oh, how terrible a person am I? So some studies showed things like that. Now, it's not all bad, because there were some of the studies, some of these 38 studies they found that did actually help. People had good stories to tell about improving their fitness levels, improving their body shape, improving their obesity levels. Their doctor said you're becoming obese, or you're getting to that point where you're going to have to start watching what you eat, or your cholesterol's too high, whatever. So there were some good outcomes. I suppose the bottom line for me is that it always comes down to the individual. Some individuals will take it too far. Some individuals will be poor under these circumstances. Other individuals are okay with it. I suppose the main thing is, for you and for people around you, just being aware of what someone's behaviour is like, and if it is becoming a bit too obsessive associated with this sort of behaviour.
Well, I've got to share with you, there's an app that goes with the park run. It's called the 5K app, and it's got a whole bunch of challenges. And I've got to tell you that one of the challenges is the position bingo.
Yep.
So when you cross the line, the last two digits of your position, so you can come 126, well, that'll slot you in position bingo, the 26th spot.
Yep.
So when you finish the park run and you realise, I've already come 157th or whatever, or 57th.
Why did I slow down a little bit?
257th. I need to get the 258th. There's real disappointment there. And the same goes with the stopwatch bingo. You know, you've got 60 seconds that you've got to count off, and it doesn't matter how many minutes it's taking you. It's all about the number of seconds. And if I just gone a little bit harder and made it across the line 1 second earlier, I would have ticked that box off in the position in the stopwatch bingo.
And then,
so I feel like I've got to go and do it all again. Not that it would count, because you can only cross the line once.
That's right.
But I'm angry at myself because I've now got to wait a whole week to beat one of those again.
and I know people who do love the alphabet bingo, where you try
Yeah.
and run at somewhere that starts with each letter of the alphabet. So they'll travel a long way
Yes.
to go and run at a different park run. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a different sort of experience.
It is.
But, provided it's all positive and you can keep it all in perspective, it's just sometimes it's hard to keep that obsessive beast at bay.
It is, and I think you're right. I think it's everything in moderation, maybe
Yes.
including moderation itself. But I think that's right. I think it is about being aware, making sure you understand what you're doing as an individual. The apps are great.
Yep.
There's so many things we're tracking with these apps now, but just, I suppose, be aware of it.
And it's okay to let go. And if you fall 20 steps short of your goal and you realise the next day, don't be hard on yourself.
That's right. It's okay. Because it's only 7,500 you need it anyway.
The race for super high-speed rail is on, and the gauntlet has been thrown down by China's 450 prototype. Now, if you're like me and you like your rail super fast, then you're going to love the CR 450. And Matt, I believe there's a bit more there. What's got the tongues wagging from Xinjiang to Shandong?
Well, it does seem like the race is on in everywhere but Australia, because I keep talking about it. Typically, when you look at the routes across the world, the air routes across the world, Melbourne, Sydney is usually in the top 3 or 4. Back in 2024, it actually dropped back to 5th across the world. Domestic routes, air travel routes, Melbourne, Sydney was number 5. 9.2 million people between Melbourne and Sydney. Surely that would be a great route for fast rail. And it is coming up towards a federal election. Normally, that's one of the things that's rolled out by someone during the election campaign. I'll bring in fast rail in Australia. Meanwhile, while we're doing nothing about it, you've got places like Japan, fantastic. I've been on the Shinkansen over in Japan. You've got the TGV in France. I've been on that as well. And of course, in China, you've got their fast train system, which is typically the fastest running normal service. The TGV in France does have the world record for a wheeled train at 575 kilometres an hour.
That's pretty fast.
That's impressive, isn't it?
It's airplane fast.
It is airplane fast, that's right. But it's not, they don't run that speed on a regular basis. Normally the TGV runs around 320, 330 kilometres an hour is kind of the normal speed for the TGV. The Shinkansen, I know I've done some tracking on that just recently where you're on the train, pull out your phone, pull out your speedometer app, and it typically is 300, although I was a bit ripped off the day I was on there and it wasn't quite cracking 300, it was in the 290s. And I'm going, just go a bit faster, find a hill to go down. But it's still pretty impressive when that's a normal sort of route. And of course, in China, they've got their current CR400, which the name kind of stands for 400. That's the maximum normal speed for the CR400. But normal speeds for the Chinese fast trains are around the 350 kilometres an hour. Again, pretty impressive. But the new CR450 is a classic example, I think, of let's make a number of small changes. Let's make a number of 1% changes, if you like, and see what that adds up to. So the CR450 is very similar to the CR400, but they've got a water-cooled advanced permanent magnet synchronous motor they've installed, the old PMSM as you would know.
Of course, yeah, it's our favourite.
And that's 3% better in converting electricity to motion than the previous model. So you go, well, big deal, 3%, that's not that much really. Then they've got just a little bit of extra oomph, if you like, or speed, because they've just fine-tuned the aerodynamics of it. Now, I haven't got an exact percentage, but they fine-tune the aerodynamics, so it's just maybe a couple of percent faster. That's not an official figure. But you go, well, a couple of percent there and a couple of percent in the actual motor itself. And then you start
Sorry, are we talking about maglev trains here, or are we talking about...
These are wheeled trains
got
still.
wheels.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
okay.
right. And it's incredible because you think it's just the same concept, but you've just done it really well. So you make sure the track's really straight and really flat, and you make sure that it's got banked curves if you've got to go around a corner, so you don't have to slow down for corners, that type of thing. So they just do it very well. But all three of those, the Shinkansen, the TGV and the Chinese trains, are all wheeled trains.
All on wheels,
Yeah.
okay.
So again, maglev, fantastic, but there's a lot of power to run maglev when you're trying and keeping it up
That's
rather than
right.
just stick it on good old-fashioned wheels.
Yeah.
So that's fine. And then you've got so these trains operate at 25 kilovolts on the overhead line, so they're not at the point where they're just running on electricity themselves in terms of stored electricity, but they do have a battery. So they've still got a battery array, and that battery array is charged by the overhead lines and runs it at 110 volts DC when it actually is running them. So again, all these things are what they're running the CR400 on, but they're hoping to boost the speed by about 50 kilometres an hour. So the normal operating speed of this would be about 400 kilometres an hour, although it's capable of 450. So it's good. They're running on, presumably by the end of this year, running on some of the lines. But again, one of the things I imagine they'd have to do is go, right, we want to run on this line. Let's check out the track. Let's see if that track is really good enough to add another 50 kilometres an hour. So that'll be the main thing. But already they say by the end of this year, they'll be having this particular track on, as you mentioned, the Chengdu-Chongqing line. How they go? You reckon that sounds
That'll
good?
do me.
So that's a 292 kilometre journey, and by the time you get up to speed and down, it's obviously not going at 400 the whole way.
So one of the issues they've got with high-speed rail is that if you've got wheels on rail, if you've got any sort of bowing in the track, and that can happen with temperature fluctuations, just with the ambient temperature, when the rails might just bow just a fraction upwards.
Yep.
So if they angle upwards at say half a degree, you've then got this running jump that this train does
At 400
at
kilometres an hour.
400 kilometres an hour. Now,
So-
that doesn't get you nervous.
So they do seem to be very conscious of their tracks, though. And again,
Okay.
this particular one, they've got that first line, 292 kilometres, but then they've got other lines that want to bring this same train into service. So I think the idea there is, let's go and check the track. Let's make sure we keep tracking it and make sure it's spot on.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to have that issue on, a very regular basis. We don't hear about lots of crashes on a regular basis with fast trains.
No.
So and maybe it's worse in
if
Australia.
it was a major problem, and I thought that might have been the problem between Melbourne and Sydney, that the temperature fluctuations could be too great from winter to summer and such. But,
and the other thing I find fascinating is the standard da-dunk noise you get on a train, which is the expansion gap so that
that's right.
the sleepers can expand. When I've been on fast trains, I just don't seem to remember that standard, or maybe it's a so fast.
Maybe it's so fast it's a beat that just becomes a word.
Yeah, or maybe they've got some way where they've got some sheeting on the top section and the track expands underneath. So maybe there's something there. But maybe in Australia the problem might be that we get some pretty hot temperatures, and as you say, Melbourne, Sydney, Melbourne gets pretty cold, but it also gets pretty hot.
Yeah.
So maybe those variations in temperature, but Japan, China, France, they get hot and cold as well.
Yeah, they've all got solutions, so yeah.
Anyway, I think it's exciting. I'm actually hoping that we put a bid in for some second-hand trains. Look, you don't need your CR400 anymore. We'll take it off your hands. We won't even pay you to take them off your land and bring them over to our land. It should be okay, and that'll be fine. We can just find some tracks for them to put them on then.
That's your project for the summer. The humble bumper bar began life as a simple and cost-effective safety add-on over 100 years ago, but it was in the 50s it became a signature feature of pretty much all the classic car designs, from VWs to Fords to Jaguars and Mercedes-Benzes. Bumper design was perhaps as significant as the grille and badge design, but all natural things evolve, and so naturally the bumper has morphed over the years, and on so many models today, Matt, the bumper bar has all but disappeared.
It has a bit, and there's some interesting rules that have been in place over the years. And I started thinking about Dodgem cars when you go to the show. You get the I used to love taking the kids in the Dodgem cars, and of course they've got the concept of the bumper really well done. They've got a big rubber bumper, and you just keep bumping into people deliberately.
Well, some have just got a metal bar that goes around them as well.
Exactly right. So they've got that protection there. What happened was some genius in the US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said, we need to give better protection for these cars that people buy, because these cars are getting expensive. So back in 1973, they introduced the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard number 215. Now, this is in America, but obviously what happens in America, sometimes in Australia, we copy off what happens there. Maybe the production volume in America meant that we were just getting cars coming to Australia that were looking the same anyway. But that particular rule said that cars could withstand an 8 kilometre per hour front collision without damage. So hence,
with a bumper bar, that was the standard.
That's right. So they made it so that you, as a car manufacturer, what do? You build a big mother bumper so that you can have an 8 kilometre collision and nothing gets damaged. Now, what they forgot in that is that you don't care that much about your car being damaged, because you've got these little squishy people inside, and we get damaged pretty easily in a car. By making it so that the bumper wasn't damaged, it made that the whole front was solid as a tank.
Yeah.
So forget the 8 kilometre an hour collision. You go and have a 50 kilometre an hour collision. Well, look at that. Didn't bend the bumper too much because we made it so solid, but the poor old person inside had all that shock transferred to them.
Jelly, yeah,
exactly right. So they realised about 9 years later this wasn't the smartest thing to do for car design. So they changed that rule, and it was still there, but it was the impact resistance requirements were lowered to 2.4 kilometres an hour in the corners and 4 kilometres an hour in the front. So now, 4 k's an hour, it just had to withstand that, which doesn't seem like much. 4 k's an hour.
I'm thinking about how many situations are you in. That's just when you're parking.
I think that's right. I think that's when you're parking.
And you've gone too close to a pole that's in front of you or whatever, and you're distracted.
I've seen people park much faster than 4 kilometres an hour too. So, but I think that's right. It's just when you're parking. But what that meant was you could start to change the design. So the first thing you could do is make it more streamlined. So that's great. That means that you could actually build it in maybe behind some sort of plastic fascia, composites, whatever. But that meant that you've got better aerodynamics, so better fuel economy, but it also meant that you weren't wiping out people, and this was a big issue from a pedestrian perspective. When you had this big bumper that stuck out, then all the data shows you hit a pedestrian, well, you take their legs out and their head smashes down on the bonnet.
Yeah.
Not good for the pedestrian.
Not very.
But it also meant that you could have something like a crumple zone, so it could handle a 4K collision without doing too much damage. But if it had a 50K collision, it could then crumple and let the body take most of that damage. Now, some people have said this means it's more expensive when you have a low-speed collision. You do get damage to your car, but I'm okay with that. I'd rather the damage to the car, not little old me sitting inside, where I'm not that easy to replace. Well, I hope I'm not. And talking to my wife here, hopefully I'm not that easy to replace. But the car is much easier to replace. It's just metal and plastic. So it's actually fascinating. I think we've got a long way to go, though. We've got the concealed bumper. Still, the solid part is still concealed there. But in terms of the design, now that you've got EVs, you can basically throw out all the ideas of car design and come up with something completely new. So do we need a bumper? What do we need there? And there's a lot of technology in a modern bumper too. The temperature sensor, when people see the temperature in their car, one of the first questions to ask is, where's the temperature sensor? And it's usually under the front or the rear bumper. You're trying to keep it away from direct sunlight. You're trying to keep it away from the heat of the engine. You want a bit of protection from the heat of the road coming up. So typically that temperature sensor is in the front or the rear bumper. So
there you go. I've just learned something new.
One of the bits of technology.
I've wondered that.
Yeah, that's right. Because sometimes people go, where would you put the temperature sensor? You know you can't have it anywhere across the top part of the body, but on the bottom you're going to have all that heat from the road as well. So, but you've also got sensors in there for airbags. So you've got a fair bit of technology, but just something which we think is pretty simple. But it also explains why you see some of those big American Yank tanks, the big Cadillacs, those sort of vehicles.
Ones, yeah,
where they had these big chrome shiny bumpers. It was almost a status symbol. How big's your bumper bar?
That's exactly what it was.
It only sticks out that far. Mine sticks out further than yours. It almost felt like that. But that's why, because they had to survive those front-end collisions. So we do some crazy things in history when we don't have enough knowledge. But we need to be able to change that information or change our decision-making when we get more knowledge. So we've done that now.
Spot on. No secrets here, folks. Wearable health tech looks great, and it's a surefire way to lure the ladies to the dance floor, if you know what I'm saying. It's the first item on the flirt agenda every time. But it seems that our secret weapon is on the way out. Now this wearable tech is being stitched directly into the fabric of our clothing. Matt, this is going to really mess with my A-game on any given Saturday night.
I was thinking you're more talking about like the propeller on the hat or the flashing bow tie. They're the big winners, aren't they, in the tech game when you're out on the dance floor?
Well.
So wearables, we do talk a bit about wearables, and when we think of wearables, we think of a watch or maybe a ring. We've talked about the ring that can do some of the things that a watch can do. We don't think about a wearable being something that we actually wear.
Yeah, well, it's going to cover our bodies now, I'm going to assume.
That's right. So we've now gotten to the point where computer threads are being stitched into clothing. So basically you've got this whole garment that's a computer monitoring device. So this has been developed by MIT, and the fibres have got a combination of copper wire and elastic fibre. So it is still stretchable, although I don't think of copper as being that stretchable, but it's thin enough strands that it can actually move with the elastic fibre.
Well, if you move it in a bit of a zigzag, then it can be stretched.
Well, that's true, and very thin strands as well. So you can move it around, so it's got some flexibility there. It's got a little bit of memory built into the actual clothing, so maybe 256K of memory, maybe about the same as a basic calculator, but that gives you the ability to do a bit of local data processing and then basically use Bluetooth, which they've got built in, to then send that to something like your smartphone. But then you can start to do things like body temperature, heart rate, body movements, not just steps, more accurate body movements, and you can have that across multiple parts of your body. And I thought about sport. We often see sport now, no matter what sport you play or watch anyway, not so much playing, but watch, you'll see the little GPS trackers that are sitting between the shoulder blades for an athlete.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes wonder when you see a tackle and you think, if they land on their back awkwardly, that mightn't be great right on their spine.
Hurt.
Yeah. They put it in the place that's least likely to have any physical contact, but still there's a possibility of that. Whereas now you could logically have this built into the whole garment. So it wouldn't just be how much you ran, how fast you ran, what was your upper body doing, what were you doing? Could you do it with your socks and have monitoring of your calf muscles, for example, and how much effort did you put in? That sprint, you could have caught that guy because I could see that you're only doing 97% effort in your left calf muscle. Your right was going okay, but your left one was just below maximum capacity. So I just don't know where it might get to.
Possibilities here.
We've had some testing done. The Canadian Armed Forces Arctic Expedition is currently testing this in extreme conditions, like in cold, obviously. And you've also the US Army doing a bit of testing up in Norway just to see what applications there might be from a Defence Force perspective. But once we get to that stage where we can wrap ourselves in this, who knows what else we'll be able to monitor. I think the main thing here is to make sure our health insurers don't get hold of this information because none of us would ever get health insurance again.
Yeah. Now, how much coding expertise do you have? Now, I'm going to guess that our audience pretty much covers the whole spectrum on this one. Me, I am embarrassed to say that I could not code myself out of a wet paper bag, even a virtual wet paper bag at that. Who cares, though, because even a complete non-coder like myself can code his way to cyber glory thanks to AI now. Matt, this AI biz destroys all excuses when it comes to coding.
It does, and so there's this whole new concept called vibe coding.
Vibe coding, I love it.
Vibe coding. Now, I do a bit of coding still, and I love when I've got a little problem I want to solve, and I go, I reckon I could just go and write a bit of code for that. But write a bit of code for that means my wife doesn't see me for 2 weeks because I go, write that little bit of code, and it's
Do you have to
involved.
reteach yourself from the start, or are you okay? You're pretty much
No, probably a little bit of reteaching there.
Okay.
You're remembering how you did things, but you just need to know the right syntax. So you got to go and look up some of that sort of stuff. But even I was president of our Rotary Club a few years ago, and we were just coming out of COVID, and we wanted to get a way for our members to get back into the idea of turning up each week to Rotary when we've been doing some virtual meetings. So I thought, well, I reckon I could hassle them with some emails and some text messages. So I wrote a little program that just put out our agenda, our program, and just did a few things about who was the guest speakers. We shared that around our members then for that year. Tell us about yourself. So I wrote all this code to do all these sort of things, and I went, this is a bit of a waste of time because I'm going to use it for 1 year while I'm president, and no other president will want to do all this stuff that I'm doing. But it was a good way to solve a little problem that I had to try and get attendance rates up again. So I turn to code sometimes just to solve little problems like that. But vibe coding, so what happens now, and I'll give people a few platforms to go and look at if they want to go and play with this. Ones that are popular, and there's probably lots more out there, but Cursor, Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T, Bolt, and Lovable are all vibe coding platforms. So you can go to one of those platforms and you can say, you know what, I want to send a message to my Rotary members with a roster that has everyone doing the guest speaking for that week. Can you write a program for that? And that would be about as much instruction as you'd have to give. And then those particular sites that I've just mentioned, or other ones as well, will go and find the best language, the best programming language to use, and then write the code for you and say, here you go. And of course, then you go, well, I've got that. I've got no idea how this works. So who cares? You go back and say, great, but I noticed that you're using an American phone number to send the text to. I need it to be a 10-digit Australian mobile phone number. Can you change that? Sure thing, away it'll go. It'll modify the code for you. So you can do this, but the long part in coding is the writing of the code. It's not coming up with the ideas.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember seeing I can't remember the name of it, there was a show where they were working at some older people were working at Google, and they were trying to get into the scheme of things. They were interns, and maybe it was called something like The Intern, but there were the idea, one of the things you had to do as part of that was you had to come up with a brilliant idea. You didn't have to go and write the code for it. And they were out drinking one night, and then one of them sent their ex-girlfriend a message, which was inappropriate because they'd been drinking, so they shouldn't have sent it. And they said, we've got our idea. Let's have some sort of test to make sure you can't send a text message while you're drunk. So that idea is great. How do you code that? How do you write an app that stops you using text message on your phone? Who cares? Go and get it vibe coded. I've got no idea whether you can actually do that with vibe coding, but that's the sort of thing I thought of.
Vibe coding is going to be the answer for everything, I think.
Just about, yeah. But that sort of thing where you can think of it, then do it. And I remember, and again, I don't do much programming now, but when I used to do paid programming, I remember I'd go in sometimes and someone would say something simple like, yeah, I like this here. Now I'd like an extra button that just does this. And I'd say, sure thing. Quick bit of calculation, bit of estimation, right, that'll be $1,000. They go, but it's just a button. You put a button there, I know, but I've got to go and write the code behind that, and that takes time. $1,000 for a simple little button. Oh, you're ripping us off. But again, that's what it took sometimes. It took lots of, whereas now you could say, oh, well, I like a button that makes it all go yellow if it's AM and goes green if it's PM, whatever. And then there's the code written for that. Thanks very much. So I've seen some people do a bit of it with ChatGPT where they're familiar enough with coding, they can say, write some code to do this. But that's when they've already done a program and they're just maybe adding to it, modifying it, adding a module. But this is going back a step further where you've got nothing. You've got a blank screen and you go, I want to do some coding, but I've got no idea how to code. Can you do it for me? So
can you do everything for me?
That's right.
But as you say, the work's in the idea.
Correct. That's
exactly
right.
So yeah.
So here's the interesting part. Google, because you can go and post some code on Google. I've used it before where you want someone to store some code. Google has found that when they've done an analysis of all the code sitting, that's not historical, but recent code that's stored on Google, where people have written code, about 25% of all new code sitting on Google, this is user-generated code, has been written by some type of vibe code or AI. Now, I don't know how they've analysed that, but that means...
how do you come by that number?
That's right, but that means a quarter of the code that's there, someone has been machine written. But it's pretty laborious too, code, so it makes sense to me that computers are good at that because they can remember all the syntax. I've got to look it up sometimes. They know exactly how you should structure that. And it's also got a library. I often cheat by looking back at previous stuff that I've written. Oh, I know I wrote a module there ages ago to do this. I'll go and look up that. Like a tricky one, I like to, when I put in, if I'm putting names and addresses in, for example, I like to have the first letter uppercase. It just looks tidy to me. Some people aren't great at it. They'll get the first two uppercase or they do it all lowercase. So I normally have a little module that just makes the first letter uppercase. But then you've got the tricky ones where you've got a McCormick or a McAnespie or a McDonald.
Oh, well,
so you want
second or third letter.
That's right, yeah. Is it a Mac Donald, M-A-C, or a McDonald? Well, in a McDonald, you want the D uppercase. A McDonald, you don't. So I remember mucking around one day, I'm going to solve this problem. So I did all the code to cover all those different possibilities I could think of. So now when I'm writing something new, I go, I'll go and grab that old bit of code, pick that up, drop it in, and away you go. But imagine the library that AI's got access to. It doesn't say, I'll rewrite this again. It goes, I've written that before, just grab that, drop it in, thanks very much. So all those advantages, I think it's great. If
you've got a problem, AI will solve it.
I think it sounds like that, doesn't it? What if I got a problem with AI? That's another ballgame.
Managing our electricity demands with a growing population here in Australia and with the average household drawing a much greater load than almost every other country on the planet, managing that presents some major challenges. Traditional coal-fired power stations or nuclear solutions needed to be kicked off 15 or 20 years ago at least if they would help us out now. So management of our electricity supply on those cracking hot days when demand is through the roof requires some novel solutions. So Matt, if the aircon goes quiet for a bit...
Yeah, and not even go quiet for a bit, I'm not sure that you and I would notice it. Sometimes I'm sitting there in the middle of summer with the air conditioning on and I get a bit cold.
Yeah.
And I think, do I put a jumper on when it's 40 degrees outside or do I turn off the air conditioner? I think I'll get up and turn off the air conditioner. That makes more sense to me. What they had in Queensland over this summer was this concept where you could have automatic adjustment of air conditioning with air conditioners that were registered in the system and just turn that power down slightly, but do it across enough air conditioners, you can make a big impact. So at one stage, they had about 150,000 air conditioners across Queensland with a power reduction.
Right, so it wasn't like a blackout and the things went off. No. They just turned them down a little bit.
Calm it down a bit, will you? We're getting a bit close to peak capacity here, and there's an easy way.
This is going to get some people really upset.
Well, you've got to register to be in the system, so you don't have to do it.
Yeah, right.
So not yet, anyway. Maybe at some stage in the future, you'll have to get a smart remote-controlled air conditioner.
Yeah, right.
But at the moment, you can just register. So they've got, at the moment, somewhere in the vicinity, approximately 155,738 air conditioners registered. About 15,000 new units are being added each year, which doesn't sound like a lot to me, but not a lot of people know about this concept at the moment. But the whole concept here is that your single air conditioner, just turn down a little bit, you won't notice that much. But multiply that across the entire grid, and what they found is they could reduce Queensland's grid load by 107 megawatts.
Wow.
That's pretty impressive.
That is enormous.
Yeah, and that's just by, it's okay. My air conditioning went down a little bit. I didn't really notice. Or maybe I did, and it wasn't really freezing cold. It was just mildly cold. That was okay. In winter, I imagine the same thing would absolutely give us some sort of similar impact because air conditioners chew up a bit in winter and in summer. That would make sense as well. So I just love the idea because we want to get more renewables. We know we want to do that. You mentioned coal-fired power stations, and we know we're going to come up with some different solutions. With the old coal-fired power days, you go, who cares about more air conditioning? Just shovel in some more coal. It'll be right. I mean, I know that's a little bit oversimplistic, but now we've got to come up with different solutions. And solar's an interesting one, and I think this concept would be more relevant in winter sometimes than in summer because in summer you've got so much rooftop solar. About 40% of homes across this nation now have got rooftop solar. Fantastic. In the middle of summer, in the middle of the day, you're generating the most power, and also that's when you need the most air conditioning in terms of cooling places down. But in winter, you probably want that more late at night, early in the morning maybe when your house is cold, and you're not going to get so much solar power generated that it might still be dark in some places. So I just love this idea that we're saying, how else can we do it? And again, someone said, let's control air conditioning remotely. What? How would we do that? But we've had off-peak systems for our electricity for a long time, and they use the power grid itself to send a frequency down to turn on or off off-peak meters. So we've done that sort of thing, signalling on those cables for a long time. So I don't imagine it was that difficult to fit these air conditioners with a unit that responded to some sort of signal that came down, presumably the electrical lines.
And there's every chance that people are overusing their air conditioners anyway. Yeah? So
absolutely right.
I think
I think you're spot on. I think we get used to it.
Rationalisation there, and Matt, you do like it a little bit too cold.
And even in winter, I know I like to walk around my house in t-shirt and shorts in winter, and people turn up sometimes with a jacket on. I go, take it off. And they go, it's so warm in this house. I probably could just put a jumper on, couldn't I? So I probably could calm it down a little bit. I've got lots of solar panels, okay, so I'm not destroying the planet too badly.
That's right. I can vouch for that. Another problem with a growing population is that cities and townships tend to sprawl into bushland. And who can blame people for wanting to bring their lifestyle a little bit closer to nature? But the impact of bushfires in recent years, subjected to a change in climate, a changing climate and urban sprawl, is that things can go from zero to catastrophic in no time at all. So we need an upgrade in early detection methods to prevent catastrophes like that seen through California earlier this year. An upgrade like a little AI support, Matt.
We go back. We're in season 5 now of Tech Talk. This is our 11th episode of season 5. So it's been going for a while. And I actually think, and I should check this before I say it, but I think in our very first episode, one of the stories we did was about bushfire detection, early bushfire detection, to try and get those fires before they really took hold. But we didn't talk about AI.
No,
we talked about early bushfire detection. That's right.
Or if it was, no one knew about it.
No one knew about it. Maybe there was AI being used, we didn't know about it. But here we go now, jump forward 5 seasons, and we're still doing the same sort of thing. And this example is over in California, and there is a network there of 1,150 cameras in high-risk fire zones. So great, let's monitor those, which again, maybe that first story we talked about all those years ago was similar to that. But the difference now is we haven't got a bunch of people sitting around looking at monitors or trying to see some sort of detection on a screen that lights up in different colours. We've got AI doing the work, and then something happens and AI says, hold on, come and have a look at this. This might be an issue. Let's go and take care of it. So that, taking the cameras for a start, great, and then adding that ability for AI to be looking at 1,150 cameras. That's a lot for a person,
for a
or people to look at. And
Yep.
people sometimes get tired. People sometimes need a quick little break. People sometimes lose concentration.
Yeah.
That's right. AI doesn't tend to
not
do that.
any of those things.
So far in these, the AI-equipped cameras have identified correctly 1,200 confirmed fires. Now, again, we haven't heard about most of these because they've been picked up early enough. And so far, at this stage, no false positives. So the 1,200 confirmed fires have been confirmed fires. The great part about this is that most of the fires are typically detected by someone calling 911 in America, someone detecting it and letting someone know about it. But out of those 1,200 confirmed fires, 33% of the time, AI informed authorities before they got any calls from 911.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that's effective about that is that when you've got poor visibility or in the middle of the night, that's when humans don't let the authorities know as quickly because they're tucked away in bed or they can't see. In the middle of the day, when it's a bit easy to see, maybe it's clear conditions and people are up.
People are out and about.
That's right.
Yep.
But
more
you
aware
can
of
have
it.
something happen in the middle of the night and by morning time it can be a raging bushfire.
Yeah.
And so having that early detection is absolutely crucial. So again, I just see that we're going to get more and more of this where AI is used for bushfire detection. And we talked about it before, maybe way back in that first episode, where we might use satellites. And as we get satellites with better abilities and maybe low Earth orbit satellites rather than geostationary satellites, but having cameras around firegrounds and something from the sky, from way above in the sky, and then AI in the mix. Yeah, bushfires do so much damage. I mean, people lose their lives, so much physical damage. But if you can get on it early, it became a little tiny spot fire that had something that did 5 square metres of damage rather than 5,000 square
Such
kilometres.
enormous potential in this.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
And bushfires, wildfires, as they called in America, just they've got people on edge right now. It's really, particularly in California, and we're talking about now. It's an annual event,
Yep.
and people are just on edge about these things. Any little bit of help that we can get with it, it's
And I've been in fire control centres when there've been some small bushfires on, and the technology in there is quite fascinating with the different overlays that you can put. You can just have a blank screen with where the fires are burning, and then you can have another screen come over that shows you the terrain, and another screen that shows you houses and roads. And so they're getting so much better with that. But those ones that I've looked at have been after it's happening, and those ones show you where people are live real time as well, so you can see, and so they can get on their radio communications and say, okay, there's a fire front coming for you, get out now, so retreat, don't keep fighting the fire because you're going to be surrounded. But it was fascinating watching some of that, but again, that was all when it was done, or not done and dusted, it was all in the middle of it rather than that early detection.
No, catching it at the start, just like with so many things, catching it at the start before it becomes a problem.
Absolutely right, spot on.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm running out of petrol and I'm now currently operating on the smell of an oily rag. But thank you very much for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
Well, I'd love to chat a bit more, but I've got to get my points. I've got to go and do some more exercise for the day.
We all do.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I've got to get
steps,
my
points. Yep.
No, so I'm only at 7,500. I haven't even made that far. I did say I've got what... well, it says I've actually apparently done 30 steps just in the space of the time that we've been having this.
This is why I have a problem with the steps. We've done no steps. We've sat here.
It's me waving my hands around the place.
Well, maybe that's enough. So.
Well, thanks for tuning into Tech Talk. Once again, folks, Tech Talk is a fantastic little podcast we're very proud of, manufactured by a horde of army ants and little busy worker bees, putting it together week after week, and we're so glad that you tune in once and again every week there. I'm James Eddy. I'm your host for this week, and I'll be there again next week even, and we look forward to your company then. We hope to see you in that time. All the best until then.